When Chris Finnoff first contacted us about putting a five-bladed prop on our PC-12, I was actually quite excited at the prospect of trying this out. I'd heard about it, but I'd never really seen or witnessed the performance. And we put it on, and I was pleasantly surprised. The airplane performed brilliantly. I could not believe the change in performance. That airplane, right from day one, would climb like a homesick angel, and it was quiet. It was smooth. The nicest part about it was when you're asked to do 190 to the marker on an ILS approach, you can. You pull the power control lever back. It's a nice smooth transition to slowing down, getting it back to flap speed, gear speed, and putting it on the runway. And just the whole process of start up to shut down. It's smooth, quiet, and the reliability of the propeller itself is remarkable. My toolkit for this propeller is a little bit of Scotch-Brite, some 2-part epoxy, and that's pretty much it. I mean, that's all I need to make field repairs. And I've made field repairs for minor scuffs and marks that I thought needed to be repaired. MT differed with me, but it was my call. I just don't know what, I mean, we've timed one out already. We're on our second 5-bladed MT propeller, and it performs brilliantly. And I don't know what, I wouldn't go back to a 4-blade. Time before overhaul was at 1,200 hours, and we went the full 1,200 hours, and I was going to present MT with a pristine propeller that I didn't think needed to be removed from the airplane. But unfortunately, an FBO had moved the airplane with an electro tug and damaged the backside of a blade, which was a field repair with about an inch missing out of the backside of my blade. It was a field repair in accordance with MT propeller, and I flew it away in half a day once the 2-part epoxy dried. So we're now on our second one, and I understand that it is now 4,000 hour TBO, and I don't expect that I'll have a problem with it until it comes off for overhaul. I think we flew our initial 5-bladed prop for just over a year when Chris Finnoff phoned us once again, and he had a new project. It was an upgraded engine from the 67B to the 67P, which basically had the same flat-rated horsepower, but that gave us all that power throughout the altitude. So you're going to maintain that same horsepower as you climb up. So your time to climb is going to be better, your overall performance is going to be better, and our true airspeed is going to increase. Well, I thought about this for a while, and I hummed and hawed, and I phoned around to a few of the guys that are flying the 67Ps, particularly some friends of mine with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and I was asking them how what they thought of the 67P, because they had the Bs on their former models. And they had nothing but kudos for that particular engine. So I'm thinking, well, they're still on the 4-blade, so if I have a 67P with a 5-blade, I'm going to have the ultimate PC-12 sitting on a 47 platform, which is probably going to outdo all of them. Not that I'm in a race with any of them at any time, but for our North Atlantic crossings, I can see this as being a significant benefit. We're going to cross faster. We're going to have that reliability. We're going to climb faster. Overall, I mean, the small increase in fuel burn was negligible by comparison to my increase in true airspeed and performance. I'm climbing to 300 in 30 minutes or less, and that's sometimes at ISA Plus. And to do that in any airplane is quite remarkable. So I'm not step climbing the airplane at all. I'm going straight to my top altitude as quickly as humanly possible to maximize that altitude for crossing the North Atlantic. I don't like to be caught short in altitude when I'm sitting over top of cold, freezing water that I don't particularly ever want to dip my toe into. So by putting the combination of that 5-bladed prop and that 67P, and after 2 or 3 months of flying that airplane, I knew I had my own little rocket ship. It was a great performing airplane, reliable. I just can't speak enough about it. It's been bulletproof. I've never had an issue with it. The significant advantage to having two batteries in the Pilatus, especially for starting that 67P, is that you'll get a lot cooler start, especially if the airplane's warm. Uh, you get that cooler start. But even when the airplane's cold, if it's been sitting out cold soaked in some place, one battery that takes a lot out of a battery to try and start that engine, and you get a nice spool up on your engine. And you'll notice that your longevity of your batteries is extended. I mean, I don't change my batteries out for 24 months, so that you get that longevity out of both batteries, so that I'm not replacing one battery at a time. When it comes time to my batteries and they no longer pass capacity checks, I'm replacing two. And then I know I have two fresh batteries, and on I go. The biggest thing about having two batteries and the safety management part of it is you're flying along somewhere and you have that engine failure. You've got two batteries worth of power. Now you go through the manual with Pilatus and you got to start shutting things down and doing it to conserve battery life. Well, I've demonstrated in the sim time and time again from flight level 300, I leave everything on. And I come down and I still have a lot of battery power. I don't need the battery to get my gear down. I can drop the gear in this airplane in a heartbeat. It comes down faster by doing it manually than it does using the hydraulic pump, or even with the newer airplanes, the electric pump or the electric motor. The nice thing is too, by having two batteries and having that, if you have that problem, if you're coming down and it's IMC because you have no choice, well, if you are shutting everything down and you don't have any battery power because you've got a single battery, you're not going to have any windshield heat. And that means you're not going to see very well where the end of your trip is going to be. I would rather be able to see and control, have some semblance of control of where I'm going to be able to put that airplane by being able to see. So having the two batteries is just that common sense safety management part. So we have two batteries. We'll always have two batteries, and one good, two better is my motto. Since we've purchased this Pilatus back in 2009, we've conducted approximately 28 North Atlantic crossings in it. The airplane sometimes will go over twice a year to Scotland, but we've noticed with since we initially bought it and took it over with the original engine and prop, to having the 5-blade and then having the 5-blade with the 67P edition, I'm constantly going across at either 300 or flight level 290 and receiving anywhere, depending on ISA, between 272 knots to 277 knots true airspeed. And, the fuel burns. I look down at my fuel computer, and as I'm up at those altitudes, once I get to altitude, I see I still have 6.5 hours of fuel remaining. And that covers me from anywhere that I need to go, as far as the North Atlantic crossing, getting into Reykjavik and back to either Goose Bay or Frobisher Bay without having to worry of stopping in Greenland for fuel. One of the neatest things I like about having this combination of the 5-blade and that 67P, especially for me, I'm crossing a North Atlantic with one engine. So I want the reliability and I want the power. And I want the performance out of that. And when I leave either Reykjavik or Isla or Goose Bay or Frobisher Bay, I don't want to hang around down in the low altitudes. So when I'm climbing out, I'm climbing out at a pretty significant rate. And by doing that, that gets me a safety management buffer, so that if I have a problem, I have an option. And having all that extra torque available to me going right to altitude is actually so incredible, because especially as you climb up, it gets colder, so you're not losing the torque value. So you've got all that power going to those 5 blades out there, getting me to altitude that much faster. And that's where you want to be crossing the North Atlantic. You want to climb up as rapidly as possible, and it doesn't matter which way the wind is blowing. Altitude is your friend, especially in those remote areas, because it gives you a long time to plan what you're going to do next in the event of a problem. And safety management is very important in aviation. And it's very important to me, especially when I'm crossing the North Atlantic with the people that I do, or even just with me on board. I want to go home at the end of the day, and I want to be able to plan that. So mitigating my risk is a very important thing. And by having that combination of power, torque, and performance to altitude, and then reaching those speeds, like 5 minutes after I level off, I'm watching it climb up. And in fact, I've had to revise my true airspeed with Reykjavik control because my flight planning system had me back at 268 knots, and I'm sitting up there at 277, 278, and depending on ice, climbing. So it's so beneficial having that performance. To me, that's part of our safety management system, is having that proven performance and reliability and that ability to climb. And when I get close to Reykjavik to start my descent, I don't start a long, slow descent. I come in and I can drop that airplane at 3,000 feet a minute, no problems at all, and what we call chop and drop, because I don't really want to be far offshore when I start losing altitude. I'd rather be close to shore, because if something ever happened, and it probably never will, but we plan for when it does or when it could. So by being close to shore and pulling that power lever to idle, I can drop that airplane basically straight down over top of Reykjavik and land on a postage stamp. It's an incredible piece of kit, and I, quite frankly, wouldn't want to leave home without it. I remember back when we first bought the airplane, we did a lot of touring in South America with it, and of course the ISA temperatures at altitude were quite warm, and with that 67B engine, step climbing to altitude, when you had a full load of fuel and basically at gross weight, you needed to step climb that airplane to altitude, which was sort of a detriment, because now you're dealing with those big, huge thunder clouds that I would like to be up at 29 and 300 so that I can pick my way through these things versus trying to slug it up from 24 and 25 and climb up. But when we put that 67P on, there's no step climbing. I just take it straight to altitude. The airplane levels off about 2.5 degrees above the horizon for about 10 minutes, and then it's right on the horizon, and it's right to its true airspeed that it should be. So it's been a remarkable difference between the B and the P engines. It's fantastic. And, the 5-bladed prop, having all that power to power those 5 blades makes all the difference in the world. A 5-bladed prop is only as good as the power behind it, in my belief. So if you have the power to turn it, it's going to be so efficient moving that air. And it has been. It's proven itself to me time and time again in all facets of the operations that I've had that airplane. Cold weather, warm weather, hot weather, high altitudes, sea level altitudes, short runways. It's just been a performer for me. Quite often I use very short runways. I'll go in and out of 2,500 feet. Um, Combined with the airplane's capabilities itself, but having that power and the ability to move that much air through that power shortens my runway roll tremendously. I mean, I can come out of the Bahamas on a 33-degree day at gross weight coming off of Staniel Key, which is 3,000 feet, and I'm airborne in 900 to 1,000 feet. It's incredible. And the Islanders down there always like to watch me leave because they know exactly what I'm going to do. So they love taking photographs of it when it leaves, and I'm sort of their novelty when I show up with the airplane in the winter.
In and out of those.
We've taken the airplane in and out of quite a few unimproved strips, especially in South America. And I remember going into this one estancia where I was warned that by a 182 pilot, you don't want to be taking that airplane in there. We don't take our airplanes in there. You don't go in there. I said, well, I guess maybe we should go and have a look at it. My My passengers weren't very enthusiastic about switching from the Pilatus into a 182 or a 180 to go into this strip. So we flew over and had a look at it. Well, the Pilatus had absolutely no issue with this strip. It was a little bit bumpy, but I mean, I think the airplane was designed for that. Performance-wise, it's amazing what you can do, how fast you can get airborne at 40 degrees of flap and having all that power in front of you with and that five-bladed prop pulling you down that runway. Well, when it comes to product support for either the MT propeller or the 67P, one phone call to Chris Finnoff and the ball starts rolling. And it's rolling quickly because he understands that we need to be in the air. We can't be on the ground. And a lot of times he'll switch me over to speaking to the MT people, or I'll speak to Pratt and Whitney people, or if there's a component attached to it where we had an issue with a generator control module. Boy, I'll tell you, I couldn't believe the turnaround on that. Chris's people got on that and had me back up flying in 2 days. And that part had to go all the way from Switzerland to New York and back to Switzerland. And I think the whole time waiting was waiting for the freight. And that was 1 day there, 1 day back, and the 1 day that the airplane sat on the ground. And that was all one phone call. It was just one phone call, and everything was handled, and it was handled expeditiously, without question. It was get that airplane back in the air because it's required. So when it comes to product support, Chris Finnoff and his people stand behind their products. And they will go to the wall for you to make sure that you're satisfied and happy and that it's working as it should and properly. A lot of people have asked me how I feel about the composite or wood core propeller versus a metal propeller, as far as strength and so on. And does it scare me that I'm flying around on a wooden propeller? And I was like, well, I've always compared it to different airplanes. Say, take an aerobatic airplane for an example. There's not many of them that are all metal construction, because you can't take that airplane and twist it up to +9 or -9 Gs and do all that sort of aerobatics without twisting and turning, because metal, when it bends, wrinkles, and it doesn't go back to its original form after the stress is removed. Whereas on a fabric and wooden airplane, especially the wing structure on most aerobatic airplanes that I've ever flown, are all fabric and wood. So you can bend it, you can twist it, and as soon as you relieve the stress, it goes back to its original shape and form. So I feel the same way about the MT propeller. I can bend and twist that propeller and stress it, climb at 20-degree climb angle, fly it out on the AOA, or I can come down and be at 40 degrees of flap and be looking straight down at the ground with the power and at idle, and that prop is out there flexing, doing exactly what I want it to do. And when I take away those stresses, it goes back to its original shape. You do that with metal, and it's going to the repair shop. So, I mean, there's no question. I mean, flexibility and strength go hand in hand. And if you didn't have that in an airplane, we wouldn't be flying. My background in aviation started at a very early age. I was almost born in a Douglas DC-3 when my mother was still flying captain up in Melville Island with Peterbottom Drilling back in 1961 when she went into labor with me. So her co-pilot and the drilling rig nurse had to fly all night long to get back to Edmonton, to where I was supposed to be born. And made it just in the nick of time, I might add. I could have had the moniker of being born in a DC-3, but it might not have been very good for my mother. But my flying started at a very early age. I would go flying all over the Arctic with my mother and father in various aircraft, everything from the Beechcraft Duke, Beavers, Otters, Twin Otters, you name it. I was pretty much the ramp rat from hell up in Yellowknife, many times being kicked out of various airplanes for tinkering around on my own when I shouldn't have been. But when I did actually do some formal training, I probably had near 2,500 hours of flying without that magic piece of paper. I've gone on in my career to have my own company. I had a crop spraying business for just shy of 18 years, and one power line in 18 years is not a bad thing. No accidents, no incidents. I've probably accumulated now just under 15,000 hours of accident-free flying. I've never had an accident. I don't know. I never knew what a ground loop was until I saw one, and it was explained to me what just happened. Um, so, I mean, I was brought up being very cognizant of doing things right, doing things the proper way. Think about what you're going to do. Think about what could happen if you do things in a manner that you're not supposed to. And that's the way I treat this airplane that I fly. I've been flying this Pilatus now since 2009. I've had it in the sky now for just over 3,200 hours. I've landed it 2,500 times, all successfully. Uh, so, but I like to think that I do things right, and I some people call me a crazy crop duster, and hey, I've done some really cool things with airplanes, and I've done some really unusual things with airplanes. But that was my upbringing. I was taught to learn to fly all aircraft to both ends of the envelope, because when you get into situations, it's nice to know what that airplane is capable of doing, given the skill set that you bring to the table. And I think that's been beneficial in my career and has got me to where I am today.